So everyone, thank you for coming and joining our second webinar in our summer webinar series. Today we are going to talk a little bit about the new features that are coming to Iconik in the Q2 timeframe, and also a little bit about what we have released in 2020 already. If you guys hadn't noticed, there's other big things going on in the world, so I think some of that news got skipped during those cycles. So before we dive into it too much, I'm Mike Zemlinski, CCO at Iconik, for those of you who don't know me. And also I've got Michael Wahlberg on. Michael, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm the VP of Product Development for Iconik. I'm responsible for the roadmap and the technology team behind the product.
So Michael's the brains that actually makes this whole thing work, which is kind of nice. He decided to come and share with us some time today. Specifically talking about the new features that are coming to Iconik, the first thing we're going to show off today, and this webinar is definitely focused on new features. So if you're coming and want a larger demo, you can definitely schedule that with myself or any of my sales team. We also have a YouTube video that I can share also with any attendees at the end. So feel free to ask us if you want a bigger picture. We're going to really be focusing on the new stuff that's coming in the very short-term future, and then talking a little bit about our roadmap moving forward. Today we'll be showing you guys asset versioning. So we added in Q1 the ability to add new versions to assets, track revisions of assets, promote earlier versions to latest versions, those sorts of things, and also the ability to control those versions from both storage gateways, uploads, inside applications, the whole deal. And also, relatively recently, we've had the ability to do drag and drop to turn multiple assets into single version stacks. So we'll be showing off that. Next thing that we'll be showing is our transcription integration support. We're targeting June release for that, so you'll be seeing a technology preview of that active right now. And that is taking AI speech-to-text recognition, importing that as a job right into Iconik, and giving you a full interface to work specifically with transcriptions. And last but not least, we're going to be talking a little bit about our drawing tool for annotations. So existing Iconik customers might know that you've been able to make time-based annotations on rich media and comments on still images and other types of documents. But what we've done is added the ability to also do visual annotations with Draw-on support. So we'll be showing that as well. So without further ado, we're going to dive into a little bit of demonstration. I'm going to start by showing you some of the versioning capabilities within Iconik. So let me hide Keynote here. And where's my mouse at? There's my mouse. So first and foremost, I'm going to dive right into Premiere, and we're going to kind of pick up where we left off from our last webinar. This is actually the edit that we made for our last webinar. And you'll notice that there are also already some versions that have been created within Iconik for this. In application, it's relatively easy to create new revisions. And I'm going to do two different things here. First, I'm going to make a small change to our actual edit itself. And from that small change in the edit, I may want to actually upload the project file itself and create a new revision. And by simply hitting upload to Iconik, it actually will prompt me now inside the Premiere panel, this will upload a new version of the project. Are you sure? Because I've already checked in at least one version of this project, I now am prompted to do a revision on that as well. So I can simply hit yes, and it will take that project and it will upload a new project. It will upload the project file itself, and you can see it stack the revision or the versioning to version 6 right now. If I click on this and go actually look at the asset within my Iconik panel, I can see all the previous versions, and we can see back when Tim checked in the original one on the date of our first webinar, and we can see all of the revisions that have been checked in since then by me. Additionally, within our Iconik panel, we have the ability to take a look here and do the same with sequences. So now that I've got the sequence and I've made this slight change to the sequence, I may want to render out a new version of that for maybe a review and approve process or something similar, or even just for finishing up the actual project. So I can hit upload render, and what that's going to do is pop open our AME presets to be able to see all our Adobe Media Encoder presets. And you'll notice that now, because I've already got a version of this in the system at least one time, it'll say, hey, do you want to upload as a new version of Drone Edit, which is the existing sequence that we already have in the system. And I can hit, yeah, sure, I want to do that. And it's going to fire that job into Adobe Media Encoder. And right now in the background, we're actually going to be rendering that little thing. It should take about 20 seconds. While that's going on, I'm going to actually go take a look at the actual asset inside of Iconik. And we can see right now within that asset inside of Iconik that you know, it is at currently version 10. So there have been quite a few revisions. I can go back and see all the previous revisions here within the system itself. But as soon as my Adobe Media Encoder and edit is done, and we hop back into Premiere, we just missed it. It just notified us that the upload process is happening. We can see inside of our edit that the upload process is complete. And if I hop back into Iconik itself in a web UI, I can see that the transcode of that new version is being created in the background. And as soon as that transcode process is complete, what will end up happening is I will actually be prompted right within my web UI that there is a new version of this asset within the system. And it'll actually tell me, hey, this asset is not the latest version that you're looking at. Would you like to switch to the latest version? So you can hang out here for a half a second while we wait for this transcode to complete. And actually, while that transcode is completing, the other thing I'm going to do really quickly is I'm going to just take a Photoshop file and I'm going to import it into my storage gateway. So I just copied a file in, and we'll get to that in a second. But now you can see automatically in the background while I was doing that, Iconik's notified me that this isn't the latest version because somebody has updated a version while I was still viewing the asset. I can simply switch to the latest, and now I see the latest version of that. I can also see all the previous versions. And if I wanted to at this point, I could also clean up old versions. So we could say, hey, version 11 is the one we want. I don't need all those previous versions. I could click that button and that'll simply delete the previous versions from the system, should I want to do that. Now, the other thing we can do is, that was all 100% within the Premiere panel, but oftentimes we're not working necessarily directly within the panels. So I'm going to go in with Photoshop, and we will take a look at my just file system here. And here is that Photoshop file that I just dragged into Iconik. I'm just going to double click it and open it. And that's going to open a new item within Photoshop. And I'm going to manipulate this a little bit. So let's say I'm going to, add a little less color in the background. I want it to be, oh, nope, I want that back. And let's get rid of our logo elements here. And I'm going to just simply save this as a new version. So as long as I put it into the same location and I name it _v2, when I hit save, Iconik and my storage gateway are going to actually be watching that directory in the background. And because there's logic in our storage gateway that tells us that anything with the exact same name _v2 is a new version of an asset, you'll see that it picked up that asset and it created a new version of it. It did the entire import process. And if I go look now, you can see there is the change in my Photoshop file. So we can see it's a little bit darker and our logo elements are gone. If I want to go back and look at the previous version, I can do that and switch up to current and so on and so forth. Now, there's other ways that you can work with this as well. So I can also go back in and say, all right, I do want to bring the elements back, but keep the background kind of dark. And I'm going to do what happens from time to time, and I'm going to make human error. I'm going to name this thing the wrong thing, and I'm going to put it in a storage gateway. And the expectation from Iconik is that, okay, that's great. We're going to bring in a new asset based on that new file that's just changed and had some modifications done to it. And if we watch our actual job logs here inside of Iconik yet again, we're actually going to see in a few seconds a completely net new Photoshop file being brought into the system. And it's not going to be a revision of the existing file. So you can see now we've got a V2 and I've got R2. I named it incorrectly. if we look at our search results at this point, we can actually see that there's an R2 and a V2. And we can see this one has the V2. That's the one with our versions on it. If I'd like, I can simply drag and drop while holding down my Option key and add a new version. So if I do that, and then it prompts me, hey, you have metadata in this case. What metadata source do you want to use? Do you want to copy it from the original item? Do you want to copy it from the new source item? Or do you just want to empty the metadata completely? I'll just say empty the metadata completely in this case. And what Iconik's going to do is allow me to take another asset in the system and associate it actually as a stacked asset on an existing item. And if we go take a look now, we can see that that's the file, that's what it is. There's the changes that I've made in it. And now it's version 3 of that file. So yet another way of revisioning without having to actually natively interact with the Iconik panel at all if you didn't want to. Now, the last thing I might want to do is use my panel, and maybe I'm remote at this point. So I can say, hey, I want to log into my Iconik panel in Photoshop, and I want to open the most recent version of that asset. So it'll actually link directly to that version. Whoops, already had it open. Open the asset. It'll open it up. And now I'm gonna, make some more changes to this. So I'm gonna turn back on my color gradient there, and I'm actually going to take my logo and make it a little bigger and recenter it. And this time, I'm just going to save this to my desktop. I'm going to call it Mike.psd. Sure, replace the old one, who cares? And now, at any time, I can continue to work on this completely disconnected from Iconik. I can simply go to my desktop, find Mike.psd, open it, do what I'd like to do with it. And when I'm ready to check it back into Iconik, I can simply log into Iconik. And for that particular asset, I can say new version. And there's also an option to upload a new asset. I simply click upload new asset. I select my file from my desktop that I've been working on at home for the last few days, hit choose, and it's going to automatically start the upload process of sending that asset into Iconik and creating the new version for it. So we can see that you can see my internet maybe up here in the corner is transferring pretty quick, and as soon as that's done uploading, that'll live in cloud storage, and I'll have version 4 of my item associated. So there we go, and now it's generating the low res for that Photoshop file. And as soon as that's done, we'll essentially have a brand new version of that asset, version 4, inside the system, visible and accessible. So yeah, we just kind of walk through using the panel within Premiere to automatically revision projects and sequence outputs. We showed how to take any given asset and just create a new version by simply naming it a certain way. We also showed how to merge assets together into a version stack should you accidentally make a mistake or meaningfully do that because it's part of your workflow. And lastly, we showed how you can just upload an asset from anywhere in the world and create a new version of it. So that's the new assets feature set that's been in Iconik now for a couple of months. Next, I'm going to turn over control to Michael, and he's going to show you some of our new bleeding edge stuff that's not quite released yet. So without further ado, Michael, I will give you control.
Yes, so I'm going to share my screen, and now I'm connected to one of our development systems because I'm going to show you some stuff that is not yet completed and not available on any production system. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the transcription support. So I'm going to take a video example here. It is a demo video for the versions that Mike just showed. And there is someone talking over this speaker voice. And we'd like to get that transcribed so we can get all of the speak into metadata in the asset. So what you can do then is you can hit the new button we have here called transcribe. And what that will do is that it will schedule a job to the transcription service. In this case, it's using one from Rev AI. And that will send the proxy file over for transcription. And once that's done, that will be available as metadata. This will probably take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to switch to a version that is already transcribed, the same file, but I did this earlier. And here you can see that if I play the video, it shows the transcription as a caption file while I'm playing the video. And you can also see that you have all of the text available here in the right column. Right now, you see it's only one segment because we only have one speaker. But I'm going to show you another asset which has a little bit more interesting content. So this is actually a cutout piece from the last webinar that Mike did together with Tim. So in this case, we know that there are two different speakers, Mike and Tim, talking about Iconik and the Adobe integration. So then when we look at the transcription view here, you can see that it's split up between speaker 1 and speaker 2. And then we also have a speaker 3 here, which is a little bit weird. So I'm going to check that later. And then it's back to speaker 2. And then we have speaker 4 and then speaker 1 again. So since this is a AI type transcription service, there might be some small errors in here. So one of the things that I can do with this view is I can basically proofread it. So I can play the video and see what's being said and listen to the audio at the same time. And then maybe I'll find something here. For example, here it says, I could have rented out a master clip at the same time. While Mike probably wants to earn some extra money, I don't think that's what he actually said. It should be rendered out because that's what he was doing. So I can click on that word, and then I can just change that here to rendered and save it. And that, since I'm only changing one word, the transcription, all of the timing, all of the word timing we got back from the transcription service will stay the same, but we will have changed this word. And if I reload my page and click on it again, it will move the marker here. And then you can see that the caption file is also updated because that's generated automatically from the text that we're actually working with here. So if you change something here, the caption file also changes. I mentioned that we also have this thing here where it says speaker 3. So I'm going to check that and listen to it. And I hear that it's still Mike talking here. So there was some music in the background, so it probably detected that the wrong way. What I can do then is I can switch the view from this transcription view to our segment view, which basically shows each of the sentences individually. And here you have speaker 3. I can click on it, and then I can switch that to speaker 2 because I know that was actually Mike talking. So I'll save that, and when I go back here to my transcription view, everything from this speaker 2 is in one segment. And the same here with speaker 4 here. It's actually Tim saying, okay, so I'm going to go in here and change this segment to speaker 1 because it was Tim. Another thing you can do in this view is if you want to change a whole sentence. There are some examples here. Let me see where I was. Yeah, so here, for example, it says, and maybe here I'm in a market in and roll out. That's not what he said. I can go in here and say, and maybe here I'm going to mark in and out. And we should use the shot with the dog, not the shot with the dog. And then I can save that segment. So that way you can change the whole sentence as well, but you might lose some of the individual word timings because I actually reorganized the sentence. So all of that information is not being kept. But I can still go back here and see that it's being kept and everything is in sync here. Another thing I can do is I can, as you noticed, if I click a word, it moves to it, but I can also mark a segment of words here. And what it does then, it creates an in and out point, and I can create a comment on this one. And the in and out marker from what I marked in the transcription will be the in and out for the comment. Some more things you can do here. I mentioned you have the caption files. You can click here. You can download the caption file if you want to. It will just show up here as a text file. In this case, a VTT file, but we will also support other caption formats. And you can also download it as plain text. And if I do that, it will show up as a text file, and you have all of the text available, so you can paste it into a document or whatever you want to do. So that is the new transcription feature that we're working on. And as Mike mentioned, it's scheduled for the next release, which we're aiming to do in the beginning of June. There will be probably some more small features around this, but this is what is available now to show. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the new annotation tools that we have. So let's start with an image. So I have this image, and previously you have been able to do comments on the images. And for example, if I wanted to tell someone that, you need to edit out that pillar in the water here, I could write that, of course, please edit out the pillar. But maybe it's not 100% clear which pillar I'm talking about and so on. So what we've added now is the drawing support for the annotation tool. So I can click here and I'll get a number of drawing mechanisms. So I have my pencil, so I can do a free text thing here. Didn't look so good. I can undo it, and maybe I'll do the circle instead, like that. And then I want to do an arrow, and I'll do that in a different color to make it real good. And now you can't miss that this is the pillar I want you to edit out. So I'll do that, and it will have a comment here with a little icon notifying that there is actually a drawing on it. So you can view what is it that you actually want to be done. And this is cool and all for the images, but we can also do the same thing with videos. So I'm going to go back to this webinar video that we had, and I'm going to go to this segment which I edited earlier, where there was something about a dog in a shop, but we changed it. So now it's correct. So it's the shot with the dog, but I'd like to set an in and in and an out point. It's not cooperating right now, so I'll set an in out point, and I'll do that here. And then I can bring up the same annotation tools here, and I can also draw on the video. And the same way here, I'll write the comment, check out the dog. And as you also can see, if you're familiar with Iconik, we have a new neat tool here, so you don't have to click the send tool. I can also do Command Enter, and it will send me here to check out the dog. The same way as you can also do a single frame comment. So if I find some other piece here, let me turn off the subtitles. I just want this box over here to be edited out or something, I can do this, click here and say, please fix this, and hit send. And then if I click the play button here, it will move me directly to this area and highlight the thing that I added this annotation to. So we have the free text available also on the video, so you can do that. You can undo, change the colors of your tools, etc. And all of this is available. Obviously, also, if I want to do a request approval, I can hit that and send that off to Mike for approval. So I'll click that and say, please check this for me, and hit send. And then that will send a notification to Mike, who's logged in here, and he's gonna take a look at this little thing that I wrote, please fix this. And then he can use the comments functionality as usual, but he can also view the small drawings that I made. So back to you, Mike. You're on mute.
No, I should be unmuted. It was in the middle of sharing my screen when I tried to unmute. So now I'm back on my system on the other side of the ocean again. And as you can see, I can see all the comments that Michael's made. And as soon as I click on them and go right to that time base, I can see the annotation. And I can reply to that and say, got it, reply, and then mark a checkbox if I want to say that's approved. So all the threaded commenting and all the workflow that we've had before still exists. And as I go to these various different comments, we can see exactly what's going on, right? So you can see the dogs highlighted there and so on and so forth. And I can say, that's Edna. Hit reply, right? So you guys get the idea of being able to extend this out. And I think it's important to note too that since the entire Iconik Web UI is available directly inside of Premiere as well, this stuff is visible right inside of Premiere as another window. And what most people do is pop out their panel out onto another monitor or into a third source monitor window. And then you can really compare everything side by side, see note annotations, see Draw-on, that sort of thing. So that was kind of where we wanted to show you guys on the newest and greatest. I think now I'd also like to talk a little bit about where we're going with this. And right now it's sharing the wrong screen all of a sudden. That's interesting. Somehow in the middle of this. Oh, we'll just do it this way. This isn't as pretty, but that way at least you guys get to see the right thing. So our roadmap, realistically, that's where we want the product to go. That's our vision and our goals of accomplishment with it. That said, our roadmap does change, and those changes are primarily influenced by market needs and customer requirements. So when we really look at the roadmap itself, obviously the last couple of months have actually changed our roadmap a little bit because there was a much higher need for some of the functionality around remote editorial and remote workflows. So we pushed certain things that we were planning on having earlier out into the future and so on and so forth. Also, our roadmap is really driven by customer requirements, but when we say customer requirements, we mean the royal customer. That means all of you guys, not just one big customer that's trying to drive things. And the reasoning behind that is our fundamental philosophy around Iconik is build tools that are useful for everybody that's using the system and not necessarily bespoke tools, because we have such a strong API behind the scenes. If you have bespoke needs, you can absolutely still accomplish some of those goals by using our API in most cases. So with that said, we'll dive into kind of where we're going. And Michael, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, so the first thing on the Q3 roadmap here is the updated jobs management view. And the jobs view that we have today is more aimed towards being a jobs history. So it's a way that you can filter and see what has happened in the system. It also shows, obviously, the ongoing jobs, but it doesn't give a great overview of everything that's happening in the system. You have to filter very specifically to find that. So we're redesigning the page and making a whole new dashboard for jobs. So that will be easier to know exactly what's going on in your Iconik domain.
So after that, we are going to focus on some accelerated file transfer frameworks behind the scenes that primarily is going to allow us to do direct ISG to ISG communication and also file transfer. So a lot of our customers have multiple storage gateways either on the same LAN with very, very fast interconnect, or oftentimes on private VPN links between each other, and don't want to necessarily transfer things out to public cloud. So what our plans are is to implement the ability for an ISG to do a point-to-point transfer. Right now, we can do ISG to ISG transfers, but that methodology is sending that object to cloud storage temporarily and then sending it back down again. So this will be, in a lot of cases, a speed savings, and also in a lot of cases, cost savings as well for customers. And we're going to build our own ISG protocol for doing this. It'll be a multi-stream TCP protocol, so we should get a lot of bandwidth out of available pipes.
Yeah, and the next thing is about Microsoft Azure Blob Storage support. We're actually doing a little bit of that already in the Q2 release together with the things that we've shown today. But that will not be the full range of functionality in Iconik. But in Q3, we are going to have full support for the Azure Blob Storage as a storage type in Iconik. So you can use it also in the Premier panel and the other panels, and also use it with the transfer mechanisms between different cloud storages, etc. The version that we're releasing in Q2 will have upload and download support and ISG support. So it's still usable for some use cases already during the summer.
Looking into Q4, we've got plans to release our Final Cut X workflow extension. To be fair, we wanted to have that out a little sooner. Actually, some of you may have even seen it a year ago at NAB and a little bit after that at IBC. And then we got a seed release from Apple that has some really cool new functionality in it that requires a lot of kind of rewriting and going back to the drawing board. And rather than release something that was only partially done, that wasn't feature complete, we decided to focus our energies on doing it right the first time. So that got pushed a little bit, but I think when it does release, our FCPX user family will be pretty happy about that.
Yeah, and the next thing is about search results showing time-based hits. What that means is that for certain time-based metadata, you can ask Iconik to create a virtual clip, which will show up as its own pod when you do a search. And that's also a little bit related to what we're doing with the Final Cut things, because then you could use that and drag it into your timeline, and it would have the in and out points that you have already set in Iconik, or already predefined. And that, of course, would also work with the Adobe panel.
Yeah, so we'll be creating these kind of virtual elements. They're objects within Iconik that don't necessarily have files associated with them, but they have their own metadata. They can be organized into their own collections and productions. They can be sent into creative tools, much like an actual object, but all they are is marking ins and out points and longer form content. So we've had a lot. We can do some of that right now, obviously, with comments and time-based metadata, but it's not the same depth that we want to have. So that'll be coming. We also have reactive credit card signup will be coming in Q4. So many of you know that Iconik's based on purchasing credits, and then you just consume against those credits. We've had quite a few customers ask us, hey, can you just bill us reactively at the end of the month for the amount of consumption we had rather than buying credits? So we'll be adding that as an additional option. We're not going to get rid of credits. You still can use that as a method if it does work well for you. We're just adding another option for payment for customers that would like to do that.
And the last thing we're going to talk about right now is the production management. And what that means is that we're building a new sort of first primary object type in Iconik, which is a production, which is actually a set of assets that has a relationship to each other, usually used for a production or a project. So it could be all of your edit or of your raw material for a specific edit project or something else. And the idea with this is that we track the file usage and the versions of all of that and keep them together in a predefined structure, even if you're moving it between storages or archiving it and restoring it. And we'll also have some type of check-in and check-out functionality so that you can make sure that no one messes with your structure while you're actively working with your project. And this is a pretty big infrastructural change or addition. So, and it also requires some of the other things that we are releasing in Q3, like the point-to-point ISG transfers is important to have in place to be able to efficiently move things from one local storage to another, for example.
Great. So at this point, that's kind of a view into the future and what we're looking at from Iconik. I know we have a handful of questions that we've answered already and a few other questions that are popping in right now. So I think what we'll do is try to answer the new questions, and anybody that has questions at this time, feel free to pop them in the Q&A and we're just going to answer them directly. And then if we have a little bit more time, we'll go through the existing questions that people have asked and reiterate them. So Grant asks, with virtual assets, or will virtual assets still require the entire high-res parent asset for sharing a project with someone on an ISG site? Yes, because you still are going to need to get access to the media. That does not necessarily mean, though, that you couldn't use the API or something along those lines to use that as a way of retranscoding media with a third-party transcoder. Obviously, that's a bit more advanced, but all the timing information would exist at that point. So taking a 2-hour clip and chopping 30 seconds out of it would be something doable. And I think we didn't really talk about the 2021 roadmap at all, but that is actually on our long-term roadmap as well. So check back in another couple quarters and you'll see that one in our presentation. Let's see. Anonymous asks, we love the backend capabilities for our editors, but there are many plans for updates to client presentation capabilities and sharing collection work. Shareable links are very long. Do we have a way to create links ourselves or other than using ourselves? Short answer is yes. I'll let Michael.
Yeah, so that's also, it's a smaller feature, but it's also coming in the next release, basically a URL shortener for share links.
Yeah. So, and then once you create a collection of videos to share with a client, can you custom arrange the order of videos that are shown? That is on our roadmap, but I don't know when. I'll let Michael.
Yeah, right now you can't do that other than naming them. The order is the title order right now, so you can do it by naming them intelligently. I think at the same time as we do the productions, that will probably be possible because that will also require ordered collections in the backend. So I would guess sometime around then.
Yeah. And then we have one more. Once you create a collection of videos to share with the client, can you select the thumbnail photo for each video? You can actually do that now with the API, but you cannot do it in the UI, so it won't be that much longer until we have that capability in the UI as well. Let's see. Samantha asks, will there be a client-friendly presentation tool to use when sending reels as samples for pitches and stuff? I think that ties into some of the last question. Our long-term goals are to allow you to do a little bit more granular control of shares right now. As you know, right now you can custom brand them, but your only way of kind of controlling order within those custom shares is through naming conventions. and you don't have the ability to do custom front-end templating. To be fair, though, that's quite a ways off. So I'll let Michael talk to how far in the future that might be.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not something that we have planned detailed in the roadmap. So the only thing I could say for sure is that it is not this year.
Yeah, and we do have a small amount of customers that have actually done this themselves. Again, you hear me say it all the time, but our API makes all of that information addressable. So we do have some customers that have built their own custom presentation portals that use collections as the backend. They've worked with integration partners to build those. A couple agencies have done that so far. Raybar asks, will there be asset support for VR in the roadmap for 2021? Technically, VR video works right now. You just get a really ugly preview because our player doesn't support it, but the video types are actually supported currently. So that would require addition to support VR video inside the proxy player with all.
We are going to not redo, but do a whole bunch of enhancements to the player during 2021 with multiple audio track support and variable bitrate support and things like that. So it might be that we do the VR also. Depends on how much request we get for it.
Ben asks, for the accelerated file transfer between ISGs, is the plan to rely on services like Signiant or Aspera or other file catalyst, or will it be a native functionality? It will be native functionality. So our goal is to have that built right into the ISG and not require licensing from anybody else to do that.
We're going to build it in such a way so that you can, at least in the future, probably not in the first release, but in the future, also plug in other systems like Aspera or Signiant or File Catalyst.
Yep. So I'll read a few of the, just in case people did not get a chance to read the Q&A section, I'm going to read a few more of these off just so that we can get them answered for everybody on recording. So which transcription engine are you using right now, from Ken? Currently, we're using Rev.ai to do all the transcriptions in the initial release. Over time, we'll support more options, just like we do with object recognition currently. But Rev's our launch partner right now for the service.
It's also important to mention that, again, everything is API driven. We have some integrators and customers who already have other transcription services integrated using comments and time-based metadata. And this data model is based on the same underlying data model as those, so they will be really easy to adapt to use this new UI instead.
Roberto asks, is face recognition in the roadmap? And we do have some customers doing it with the API right now. We really kind of needed the Draw-on support before we could even think about it. And I think after the Draw-on support is released, then we can start to look at that as first-party support. Sean asks, what's the cost per minute through Rev? Currently, right now, it's we're going to charge the exact same amount that is retail for Rev. So if you just go to rev.ai, it's the same price there as it is through Iconik. There will be no difference there. Mattia asks, can you custom name the speakers from speaker 1 to mic? We will be able to do that in release.
Yeah. Ilan just asked a new question also about sharing your collection with the request approval functionality. And yes, that is on the roadmap and will be available in not the upcoming release, but the one after that.
And it looks like Vitaly just asked, are you working on automating camera footage uploads into Iconik in the field? I think he's trying to start a fight between you and me. But the idea is that a way of decardifying media. We have several customers using a variety of different tools right now to handle that. The most common I've seen are Kino and Edit Ready to do that. Prelude also works quite well. We do not have a panel yet for Prelude. It is a completely different panel programming, so to speak, than all of our other ones. So it would require a pretty significant development effort. But I think in the long term, we do want to have that functionality. But since there are commercial options available already for customers that need it, we're relying on that until we can get to a place to do it ourselves. Let's see, where were we back in here? Can we supply our own transcription services? I think Michael addressed that a little bit earlier, but the idea is you'll be able to use our data model with the API. So should you want to use a third-party service or even your own private service, the data model is going to support single word timing, that sort of thing. Can we download SRT and VTT? Yep, we demoed that. Ilan asked, what happens when you need to retime a word? So right now, the word is going to be locked to the timing. With the API, you could theoretically retime a word without too much issue. The UI will allow you to replace the word with another word or words and maintain the same timing.
But you can retime the whole segment and keep the word timing inside that segment. So if everything is shifted, you can adjust that. That's possible to do in the UI.
Yep. It would be great to be able to edit subtitles you upload as well as bring this in as metadata. Michael, you can address that one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it might not make the first version, but we will most likely make it an option when you upload a subtitle file to also add that as a transcription. So that way you could work with it as if you got it from a transcription service, but it was actually a subtitle file to start with, because we could just use that data.
Yeah, so that won't be in the initial release, but maybe before too long, that might not be too hard of an uplift in the future. Wings asks, are we going to be able to deploy this on a true NAS as far as running the storage gateway? And the answer is, yep, that is already supported and available. Now let's see, we got a new one from Bastian. Any info about the ISG Pro gateway? Is it still coming?
That's yes, it is. And for example, the point-to-point transfer thing was initially something that was going to be exclusive for the ISG Pro. We will see if we do that or if we sort of relicense it. It's more of a licensing question than a actual product question, because we're adding more and more functionality to the ISG all the time. So there is a blurry line between the ISG and the ISG Pro at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's probably, if I'm reading the tea leaves, it would be to monitor multiple directories on disparate file systems with a single ISG. Most of our customers are just doing that with dedicated multiple ISGs in virtual machines when they have those sorts of needs right now. But we'll see over time. Anonymous asks, does Iconik currently integrate with Dropbox cloud storage? If not, will it in the future? So it's a bit difficult, and we'd have to get pretty techie to explain why we don't right now. But at a very high level, unfortunately, Dropbox doesn't really have a way for us to natively access files. We have to transfer files in and out of it as far as the service goes. So as soon as they change that or give us APIs that allow us to have direct native access without having to transfer first, then we absolutely could. And maybe that functionality is coming in the future for them, or maybe there's a hidden API we're unaware of. But in all of our looks into actually not just Dropbox, but this is true of Box.com as well, and Google Drive and a few other of those players, the desktop syncing tools, their API stack doesn't allow us to do what we might need to do. So I guess the answer is we would love to if their technology stack allowed it. And there are ways around it, but it requires you replicating 100% of your Dropbox storage to a file system and watching it with the storage gateway, which is not optimal.
Yeah. Raybar asks, can transcriptions be transferred to another version of the video asset? Yes, we are working on a feature to copy all segments, as we call them internally, which is comments, time-based metadata, and the transcriptions between versions, and obviously be able to select which one you want to copy. But yes, you will be able to copy a transcription to another version, so you don't have to retranscribe it if you only did a color correction, for example, because it's unnecessary to do it again then.
Yeah, obviously, if you change the timing of your version, which is a very real thing that could happen, your transcriptions are no longer valid. So there's, but if you are doing a no timing change, it should be relatively easy to, uplift those as well. Great. So I think we've gotten through all the open questions. Let's see. Yep, I think we got through all the open questions so far. If anybody has any further questions, feel free to reach out to me or Michael. I'm happy to answer those as well offline, and we'll actually post this webinar, make it available for everyone shortly after. And we are doing a few more of these throughout the summer. So if we take a look here, we've got our next one coming up on May 19th. Mattia and I will be doing kind of a primer of getting going with Iconik, from creating the domain to setting up some metadata, adding a couple of storages, and adding your first asset. So fresh out of the box, how long does it take you from the time you get the email to the time you got data in the system webinar. And then shortly after that, we have a few others that are probably going to be a couple weeks out. We're trying to do these every 2 weeks. The upcoming webinars are going to be, we're partnering with one of our integrators in the UK to show off and demonstrate in real time 100% cloud native editing with Iconik. We're going to dive a little deeper into the Iconik panel for the Adobe toolkits a few weeks after that. We're going to dive into storage management, handling transfers and checksumming and all the other fun things that happen with the various different types of storages in Iconik. And then we are going to be partnering with Backblaze later in the summer or midsummer, and showing how to migrate very large data sets without necessarily uploading, using some of their technology like the Fireball and some of the things we built into the storage gateway. So with that, I will give you guys back 6 minutes of your day. We really appreciate everyone coming. And again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any further questions. Anyone else have anything? Let's see, we're getting a couple of chats in here. Mostly people saying thanks, so you are welcome. Everyone have a great day, and we will talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.